Hello, I'm Midori, and welcome to another Consent Dojo. And every month, I have this lovely time to invite really interesting friends of mine to talk about all sorts of things around and concerning consent from specific lens, viewpoints, and specializations. And the point of Consent Dojo is to recognize that consent may seem simple, but it ain't easy. And we actually need to practice it every day. So we need to build the consent muscle daily. Ooh, I'm bare armed today. We need to
Yeah.
build our consent muscle. And so here we are. And I have a lot of things about consent that I'm curious about. And there's a lot of things that I don't know. So I'm hoping that you all will come along on the journey with us today. I am, ah, Today I am delighted to welcome my friend Wiliam Winters. And let me read the official bio here. Yeah. So about Wiliam. In 2014, the San Francisco Chronicle, that's our local newspaper and gab sheet, named Wiliam Winters the quote, de facto king of the East Bay polyamory scene, unquote. He's been working to earn that title ever since. William's the founder and co-organizer of Bonobo Network, excellent group, by the way, and William's a San Francisco Sechs Information-trained sex educator, a Somatica Institute-trained sex and relationship coach, and a voracious student of sexuality and relating. He also serves as a member of the Organization for Polyamory and Ethical Non-Monogamy, OPEN, open, that's cute, board of directors. Williams' perspective on non-monogamy have appeared in San Francisco Magazine, KQED's Forum. KQED's our local NPR, and I am a junkie of that. The San Francisco Chronicle, the New York Times, and podcasts including Multi-Amory and Normalizing Non-Monogamy. He's facilitated conversations about polyamory and sexuality in settings including university campuses, political conferences, living rooms, festivals, Burning Man, Between the Sheets, and more. I added that part. Um, he lives with his wife and their stupid cat in Oakland, California. Is your cat stupid?
Well, uh, it's an old bio. She's no longer with us, but she
Oh,
was very stupid.
oh, okay, okay. Uh, so let's, so many things that I could ask. Let's dive in with explain Bonobo Network.
Yeah, sure. So, Bonobo Network started off as um, well, started with me throwing a play party for my 31st birthday in July 2010, and since then we've grown into a membership-based community with 1,900 members concentrated in the Bay Area and scattered around the world. Um, and we're a community that does our level best to bring people together in celebration of and exploration of sexuality and relating towards, you know, a vision of collective joy and liberation. Um, a lot of what we do programmatically
Mhm.
is throwing um, like big play parties. But that's far from the only thing. We maintain a private, like, sort of membership platform where people get to communicate with each other, ask each other questions, learn the ropes from one another around like polyamory and ethical non-monogamy and open relating and sexuality questions. We have like a daily peer support check-in call that happens Monday through Fridays where people get to just like call in for like an hour, 90 minutes and just like get some good high quality listening from other folks. We
Oh,
have
wow.
a book club. We do multiple meetups both in person and virtually each month.
Wait, book club. All right, explain the book club part to folks.
Um, it's a pretty standard book club, I would say. Just with topics that are more of interest to Bonobo members. So lots of reading about sexuality and psychedelics. That's a hot topic in the Bay Area, and relationships. Yeah, so we read everything from um, uh, oh man, I think the first book was Carl Hart's book about the drug war, and I'm drug use for grown-ups. We've read um, both of Jessica Fern's books. We've read uh, yeah, just like a lot. We've read some nonfiction. I think we read some Octavia Butler earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a pretty varied set of books, and we get like about a dozen to 2 dozen participants,
Wow.
each month.
In
So
in
pretty good.
terms of the support call that you mentioned,
Huh?
what are the sort of topics discussed?
Oh, gee. Everything from relationships and the hard breakups people are going through to the challenges navigating play parties, to you know uh like people sharing their grief about like COVID and the world moving on in particular ways, right? I mean, there's space for most things there, and we have a team of awesome volunteers who are super dedicated, who love what they do, and yeah, and they're facilitating those spaces 5 days a week.
What? You mean to say that Bonobo Network isn't just like random sex party of people just going at it like it's imagined in, I don't know, Eyes Wide Shut or whatever? I am so shocked.
Eyes Wide Shut has some of the worst depictions of what sex parties can be I've ever seen. The fact that someone actually felt inspired by that film to create their own organization baffles me. I
Oh,
like it boggles the mind. Yeah, you
oh,
know, Sanctum.
oh, okay. Right. Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't knew.
Yeah.
Okay. Just for fun. Um, uh, everything that's bad about Eyes Wide Shut versus reality. Go.
Uh, yeah, I mean, well, first off, I mean, Eyes Wide Shut imagines these like super elite parties filled with like masked rich white dudes, uh like the men who control the world, right? uh
Mhm.
and that's certainly not who comes to my parties. Um
What? Ordinary people?
yeah, the ordinary folks. Secondly, yeah, let's talk about the masks and the ways that when people aren't particularly bought into a culture, when they feel like they have certain things to lose, when they like power and control, like masks are really something that makes sense. But masks also, besides preventing like personal connection, they also prevent like accountability, which is something that the people in Eyes Wide Shut may not know that much about. And so it means that like all kinds of bad behavior can be done and perhaps like gotten away with in certain respects, right? And that's not what we're about at all. So that's another terrible thing about Eyes Wide Shut. What else?
I was putting you on the spot with this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like
I just love to
trying to
pick
remember
on
all
bad
the
things.
layers of bad of that
Yeah.
movie.
So many layers of bad, right? One of the things that I love, love, love about Bonobo is how much care and attention and constant evolution you have put into your consent and pre-party briefings.
Oh yeah,
And it's not just a sign or like a form that people sign that nobody reads that's essentially says don't be a jerk and all the legalese or whatever. You put a lot of thought into it. Would you mind telling us about how it came to be and what it is and how it's developed?
for sure. Yeah, it's fun. I finally got to put my philosophy degree to use after college. Uh, running my running my own play party organization. My
Ooh,
parents were so
that's
proud.
a way to recruit people into philosophy major.
Exactly.
Become a philosopher. Run a sex-positive community.
That is one way. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I think that like I'm just a culture nerd and I always have been. You know, from my involvement in politics and trying to figure out like how we win as lefties and progressives um, in the systems that we have, given the constraints that are handed down to us. How do we like communicate what's important in a way that people can actually hear and that they can actually get and understand. Um, and so I brought a lot of those kinds of perspectives on like how to build culture into Bonobo in the early days. Um, for a long time, the opening circles of each party, which were mandatory, still are mandatory actually to attend, were the primary sites of like um, transmitting the culture of the organization to the attendees. So we have six principles in Bonobo that we talk about pretty regularly. Yep. Um, the first is that play parties are best when they're treated as high possibility, low expectation spaces. Um, the second is consent. The third is basically about trust and trustworthiness. It's the idea that containers like the ones we create take a lot of trust to build, but they're also pretty fragile. And so, like, participating in these containers means that you have to show up pledging to be your most trustworthy self, and we suggest some ways that people can do that, among the many that I'm sure exist. The fourth principle is high challenge, high support. It's the idea that play parties and sex positive communities, uh, can be really hard and not just fun. I think people get the idea, maybe from things like Eyes Wide Shut, that you walk into a play party and it's all like weird robed masked rituals and people having fun, grabbing ass, when in fact, these spaces seem to me almost uniquely designed to bring up your deepest high school shit. All the questions about like belonging and like, do I fit in here? And like, what's my place? And am I the kind of person who can get what I want? Oh my God, do I even know what I want? And then you add like sex to an already challenging and awkward social environment, and that just makes it worse. And so, potentially, and so, yeah, and so we try to create a really supportive environment in the spaces that we create. Um, um, Fifth principle is participation. The idea that like every time we bring people together, it's a co-created space and not just a product of me and my business partner Misha's vision. Um, and the last principle is inclusion, because we think that these communities are best when a lot of different kinds of people get to experience them. Yeah. And so
You were
those are the six principles.
you were talking about the fantasy that it's like all these masked robe people and you walk in and there's a grab ass and sex going on. N- Making that happen takes like months of negotiation.
For sure. I mean, I think that one of the things that people don't really realize about play parties when if they're either casual observers or like completely unfamiliar with the space or maybe brand new to the space. I think that it's just so hard to get across the idea for like in Bonobo. This is true. This isn't actually true of every space, right? But like Bonobo is what I think of as a high context like sexual environment, which means that it's not anonymous. It means that people generally know each other and want to know each other and that like knowledge of one another is like one of the ways that people build the kind of familiarity and trust that it takes to like share sensual and sexual energy between people. It's not simply a matter of it's not simply a matter of um people walking in like, "Hey, let's fuck everybody." That's that kind of behavior would get one laughed out of the party, I'm sure. Uh,
Like I said, that kind of to create that kind of scene requires a lot of negotiation with a lot of people to
a
make
lot
it.
of negotiation, a lot of context,
Yeah.
and a lot of trust, and I think that um, the more skillful you are at you know, demonstrating that you want to connect with people in like non-exploitative ways, where like they will feel seen and like fully engaged as a human being and not just as like a sexual object. The more
Yeah.
um successful you'll be in sort of generating connection of all kinds for yourself, not just the sexual ones.
And how are you in this case envisioning successful? So let's
Yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah. That's where the quotes came in.
right,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, what are
yeah.
some of the ranges of, let's say that I'm coming to a party and I don't know what to expect. What are some variations of success? I'd like
Yeah,
to
sure. I
frame
mean,
it.
so Reed Mahalko, a friend of ours, sex educator, at the play parties that he throws, and I think this exercise is also used in Cuddle Party. They do an exercise at the end of his opening circles called Mildest to Wildest. And it's basically asking yourself, what's the mildest experience I could have here and still walk away saying, I had a great time. That was worth the cost of admission. And then on the other hand, imagining for yourself, what is the wildest thing I could imagine participating in? And say, and like actually integrate that as pleasurable. Sometimes people like have
Yeah,
good times that really, like blow them out, So
yeah.
like really imagine like what's the biggest good time you could have that you could actually integrate as like a pleasurable experience,
The mildest to the wildest. Come to think of it, that is when I go to parties, while I haven't put it in the read language of read ease, mildest to wildest is that is what I do of okay.
Yeah.
Um
And
what
so the
yeah.
oh, sorry, go on.
And sometimes going to a party, what I want is to, oh, I know that William's gonna be there, and I hope I get like a few minutes at the snack table, like just catching up with this wonderful person.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that people's wildest like is often contextual.
Mm,
Um, but for most people who attend Bonobo parties, I would imagine that like the mildest is something like I want to feel connected and accepted in some way. So a lot of time I hear, I want to I want to like maybe cuddle with someone, or I'd like to make a new friend, or I'd like to have just like one good dropped in conversation with someone new, you know.
Or
Uh,
let's see.
yeah.
I'm thinking back to some of the parties I've been to, and without having voiced it, I know that some of my mildest have been, I want to feel desirable.
Mm-hmm.
And feeling desirable doesn't mean fucking, could include it, but it could just be somebody going,
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, it could mean that someone just like a random person just walks up and compliments you, you know.
yeah. Or I put together this like new outfit. Um,
Yeah.
and then there's all the wildest. So for the viewers, think about mildest to wildest and what determines success, because it's certainly not what's trotted out in the media. And speaking of viewers, for those who are here live, thanks for joining us. Any questions you might have, please feel free. It would be helpful if you put question colon out in the chat, or just put it in the Q&A and I'll check it out, or talk amongst yourselves. Uh, Now, what we're talking about, sex parties, cuddle parties, sex positive and consensual non-monogamy environments are certainly not, shall we say, regular or normative, normative, again with the quotation marks, sexuality. And yeah, you and I are in the Bay Area, right? So it's kind of in the water. See, it's in that tea you're drinking, I swear.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's in this, okay? It's in the water we drink, etc. We've been talking about consent in the Bay Area for decades now, and
True.
negotiation.
Yeah, and I've seen so many iterations. Like I first started going to play parties in the Bay Area in 2009, pretty shortly after I moved here in November 2008. And I've seen so many iterations and like moments of like sort of progress in like the practice of how facilitators and organizers frame consent and teach consent in sex positive spaces. Like it's just I feel like it's like the conversation has grown by leaps and bounds.
It is constantly evolving, and to folks who are just dropping into deeply thinking about consent, it may seem like there's a hard and fast rule and it's done this way, but it's been developing along the way with stumbles and fuck ups and thinking about how things could be, different ideas from different fields being brought in. So it's a constantly evolving thing. Now, let's say that I'm Jane Average, right? And having just moved to the Bay Area, like you said, you moved to the Bay Area. Um, and I've been socialized and raised in regular sex, dating, mating, escalator concept. How do I go from that to what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think that I know that for myself and for a lot of people who I've sort of observed as they check out Bonobo and spaces like Bonobo, um, like successfully navigating these spaces and so I think success just means getting some version of what you want out of the space. Usually that's just connection, like just like sort of eking like meaningful connection out of the space. Um, like I feel like it often takes um, shifting some paradigms and like ways of seeing the world that I think are really deeply entrenched in like monogamous and like sort of mononormative um, ways of moving through the world, right? So, um, uh, yeah, maybe I'll start with like identifying some of those things, and then we can talk about like how to shift some of those things. Secondly, so like one of the things I think people need to shift um, is um, like their views on scarcity. Like I think that sometimes when you're dating out in the world, it can be very easy to like get trapped by the idea that like there's not enough sex to go around. Particularly, I mean, I think for people who are in like uh who are sort of socialized as men in the society, there's this idea that like sexuality and sensuality and those forms of connection are like a scarce resource. And so like I think when like we've all sat down to eat when we're hungry, and like you're not exactly doing mindful eating at that point, right? You're like, it's very easy to like wolf down your food to like try to scarf it down in a way, right?
Mhm.
And um and I feel like when people show up in that way with that mindset in bonobo spaces and in similar spaces, like it's extremely socially off-putting, because or it can be extremely socially off-putting because again, when you show up really hungry or really thirsty, then like the thing that you're most attuned to is often like your own sense of need and not like the sort of subtleties of the needs, wants, feelings, or personhood of the people around you.
So
And,
at a concept level, right? So what you're saying, I think, is don't show up desperate, right? Don't show up hungry, thirsty. It makes sense. What does that look like? And you say it's off-putting, which means it's visibly or in some manner identifiable.
huh?
And what does it look like? Or maybe is that a what not to be, what not to do?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what it can look like
Yeah.
is um like again, I mean, for a high context social environment, I would say one of the ways it looks is making like really escalated invitations with people with whom you don't have that much context with, so
Can we
like
role play this out?
yeah, sure.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
so I'm at the snack bar. We don't
Yeah.
know each other.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Oh, cool. Wanna fuck?
Uh,
Is that a yes?
what what's your name? Who did you
Yeah.
say that? What?
Yeah, I mean that I feel like that's an extreme example of
Uh-huh.
it, but I mean there are just like so many ways I think to do lesser versions of that, like sort of escalating towards physicality before there is like or like before there's like actual context, like people think, okay, I'm in this consent forward environment and we're encouraged to ask for what we want, and that's true, but it's only like a part of the story, right? I think there's a skill of making attuned invitations into connection that are kind of about like assessing like what people are actually up for,
Mhm.
and having a sense of like I think that like people sometimes like think of play parties as sex parties, and so if there is playfulness it must be sexual, when in fact there are so many ways to like play and bring a sense of play and a spirit of play into our invitations. And yeah, again, I think that the more skillful you are and the more patient you are in like sort of developing those uh skills of like, sort of playful attuned invitation, um the more likely you are to build the kinds of relationships and the kind of like context in the community that will help you to
Let's
find connection.
let let's redo that role play, right? So you're give it let's do a concrete example of it.
Sure.
And all right, so same character, same situation. Strangers, I'm at the snack bar.
Sure. uh hey, how are you?
Fine.
Cool, how's your night going?
Pretty mellow. I haven't been at this party in a while, but I don't think I've seen you around. What's your name?
Yeah, I'm William. What's yours?
Midori. Nice
Hey,
to
so
meet
good,
you.
so good to meet you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. um it sounds like you've been in the community for a while but haven't been here for a while. Is that true?
Yeah, work, self-employed, and uh mm, yeah, I just kind of wasn't in the mood for a while, and a friend of mine invited me, so I'm like, I should come out, and it's nice. I'm running into old friends I haven't seen in a while.
Hmm. Yeah, cool. So are you here with friends?
I am. Bunch of folks that I know from like this party, but also like from Burning Man. Do you
Nice.
know people here?
Oh, I'm brand new. Yeah, this is my first party, but I'm really looking forward to getting to know people. I really dig the community.
Um, would you like to meet some people?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay, let me see about bringing some of my friends. Oh, hey, here's my friend, and let me introduce you to my pal Misha.
Oh, hey,
And
Misha. I'm William. Yeah, yeah. So there we
there you
go.
go. Yeah.
Wow. See, I mean, it's just like a very like unhurried, attuned conversation that's like, hey, I am actually interested in getting to know you and your context.
Mhm.
And like, I'm not in any particular rush to like, sort of escalate the connection into physical intimacy.
Yeah, and I like the part where you said that you are looking to make friends, but you weren't like, hey, I want to meet your friends and fuck them.
That would be bold. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Let's see. There's an example in the chat that I'd like to read out.
Sure. Yeah,
And
great.
somebody said, I have an example. My second time in a dungeon, someone asked if they could watch me while I got topped with a violet wand. A violet wand is one of these static electricity zappy zappy toys for folks who don't know. And for the first time with a violet wand. I said, sure. Then the person waited until I was on my stomach laying on a massage table, and uh, the the person topping turned away to bend over and whisper to me, you have a really nice ass. Can I touch it? Oh, wait. When the person topping them stopped, the watching person said, you have a really nice ass. Can I touch it? It was super creepy. And then they continue. When I told someone about it, someone said, well, at least he asked. I don't think that was the best point in time to ask. Waiting until
Yep.
I was on my stomach in a vulnerable position with the demo top turned away from us. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, I think that like
Oh, but for
there's
that example, I actually want to you and I and the person writing this understand that it's creepy, but I want to go back to the but I asked, and witnessed this before of
yeah.
but I asked, and
Yes.
yeah.
So, I guess, it stems from a real misunderstanding about what consent is. Like, and again, I think that the ways people talk about consent in sex positive spaces is shifting away from some of the old ways.
Hey,
Um,
William, I'm going to leave you talking because I need to get the door, and I'm
oh,
going to be
okay.
listening just off camera.
Okay, great. Sure. Yeah. Um, yeah. So consent is often framed in spaces, uh, in sex positive spaces as like, you ask for a thing, and then if someone says yes, then you can like do or have the thing. It's very like transactional in that way. And um I don't think that is like actually what consent is, because I think that like if that were all consent is, then like that weird person asking to touch your butt like, while you were face down, like would have been okay. And like the demo top saying, you know at least they asked, wouldn't have felt so hollow and empty, and dissatisfying, like I think that the nature of consent is really about collaboration, you know like like when I describe what consent looks like at its best, I think about children playing on a playground. I think about uh I think about like, kids playing, and like just sort of like collaboratively like creating the rules of the game together as they go along, right? And that is, I think, not the way people typically think about consent. So the way we define consent in Bonobo Network, and I learned this definition when I took the San Francisco Sechs Information-trained a number of years ago. Um, Consent is an ongoing collaboration between two or more people who are in constant verbal, physical, and emotional dialogue about what each other needs to willingly, safely, and pleasurably engage in an interaction with one another. Like that definition is a mouthful, but I feel like it gets to the core of what consent is more completely than any other I've seen. It's like, consent, like a consensual interaction shouldn't look like a pro forma question, and like a response to the pro forma question. Like really good consent looks like a co-creation. It feels like a co-creation. It feels like a collaboration. And as a practice, consent centers the other person or people involved in the interaction. Like it actually like centers their well-being, and like it necessarily involves a level of curiosity about what is actually aligned with this person's well-being, and pleasure what their pleasure looks like, right? You're muted, Midori. I see your lip.
Thank you. Oopsie.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, we have contractors, and I had to
yeah.
say
Oh,
bye to them. Um,
okay.
anyhow, okay, so I not devil's advocate, but let me be advocate for this um person mentioned in the party, the third party, because this is a really good example that the attendee brought up of the two people on the scene for and uh uh third dude like, hey, can I watch? Okay, sure. And then in the midst of it, um so I'll be I'm going to give benefit of the doubt for third dude,
Sure.
and I think there's going to be a lot of people out there who may be thinking and meaning well, fumble into behaving like third dude
Sure.
and coming off creepy. So I'm
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
I mean, I don't want to say that like third
Yeah,
dude like fucked it up irreparably,
right.
exactly. But
But
I think that like looking at this definition of consent just means that like it's something that we can always like
Right.
orient towards being better at by inviting more information about how to take care of one another.
So let's break this out, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
sure.
um, if I were in the shoes of third dude, and talking about the evolving communication and like good kids playing, the Sfissy example that you gave, that, but I asked at the beginning and I kept asking, or I asked again, and then they said no, so I don't understand why. I thought I was following the Sfissy guidance, so why am I considered creepy?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, um,
Because this happens, and
totally. Yeah.
many of the people I consult with are like, I think I followed the rules,
Mhm.
and and especially for brains that are working around, this is a set of behavior.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. I mean, um, I think that once again, this is one of the ways that the standard model of consent fails people, you know? Um, because I think that like there is a lot of behavior in sex positive spaces that are sort of done according to a model of consent that is more that can be more extractive than collaborative. Like it's about you getting what you want and not actually that attuned to the needs of the other person, right? And so I think that it's relatively easy to imagine that like perhaps asking someone mid scene to like bite their butt or touch their butt or whatever it is, while they're like face down and extremely vulnerable, like might not be a great experience for the person receiving the request, right? Um, like it, I feel like it doesn't necessarily take a lot, of like putting yourself in other people's shoes or like advanced empathy, to like sort of like to just like imagine that might be the case, right? Um, and like the fact that like you sort of made the request without taking the time to like sort of imagine what it might be like for this person to receive the request in this moment, like indicates, not in like big ostentatious ways, but in subtle ways, that like you are sort of privileging your desires and your experiences over the experience of the person to whom you're making the request, right? And uh that is the heart of creepiness. Like at the heart of behavior that is read as creepy is um like a sort of almost like incongruence between um like the idea that someone is like making an offer that like uh might be, or that they think is, or trying to make sound is like for your benefit, when really it is about their benefit and their experience, right? And I feel like the more that disparity is like sort of felt, the more creepy one might be judged.
The person who gave this excellent example added some more information. Uh, they said, me being new at the time, I didn't say anything to that person other than no, and saying no, yay. Um, to, um, I didn't say no to that person or to the person topping me or to the people running the dungeon, because I recognize that this person didn't technically break the rules, and uh and that was such a great point, an absolute lack of awareness on how the other person is receiving the request. He didn't understand his power or privilege at the moment.
Yeah.
So let's rewind and bring back the situation of person one and two having a scene. Third dude gets the permission to watch. And third dude thinks, wow, she's got a great ass. Thinks it. Now what?
You keep sitting and watching. And that's it. Sit on your hands or like find something else to do if that's not enough, right? Um but yeah, I mean I just think that again, particularly with like low context relationships, as it seems like that was, like I would be pretty cautious, like pretty modest about like my assumptions um about like how open someone with like zero context who's like mid-scene with someone else might be to like my participation in their experience. I feel like just like having that kind of like modesty of expectation is like a safe bet. It's not going to be true for everybody. There are some people who don't require a lot of context, who are just voracious and who like want their ass touched as much as possible in whatever circumstance. But that's like, I feel like those people are outliers on the distribution curve.
Better to play it safe. Yeah. Now, part of the title of our talk today is belonging. And you use the word connection several times. As sex positive cultures and sexually social cultures and communities like Bonobo is a place where people find belonging. And that's something, loneliness is such, well, that is another pandemic. Loneliness is such a suffering.
Yeah.
If I am, say, new to an area, or if I am new to the culture, right? What can I do once I say get a foot in the door and find some places? What can I do that would help me in a sense of belonging in this new world with all sorts of different rules?
Hmm. Yeah. Um, a few things. I mean, so first off, I would, if you have like the time and space in your life, I would really prioritize taking time to learn about the new spaces that you want to enter, you know?
Hmm.
Um, like there are so many books these days on open relating and polyamory and open sexuality and kink and so on. Um, um, there are so many like good options for doing some learning ahead of time, you know, like a lot of resources will sort of address like what the vibe of different communities is often like, you know.
There are some books
So there's that.
to figure
um
out mm,
oh, sorry,
figure
go
out
ahead.
to figure out the vibe of say specific communities. What could I do?
Yeah, so for specific communities, I mean, I would say just like dip a toe into those spaces, you know. So if you're in the Bay Area, and I feel like most many like sort of big urban areas in the United States have similar resources, like finding the local kink organization or polyamorous organization. Sometimes you can find them via Google, or you can find organizations through Meetup. You can search for Facebook groups. Often there are like local Facebook groups like Seattle polyamory, or there's um, uh, like Sex Positive Portland or whatever. I don't know if they're on Facebook, but um, so like finding those organizations, um, finding like local events and meetups, like often, not everywhere again, but often there are like poly happy hours and like open relationship potlucks and those kinds of things. The kink world does munches, like that's a really common way of meeting folks in that world. I've been to a small handful of BDSM munches here in the Bay, and it's just like a bunch of people, some of whom are like extreme enthusiasts for a thing, others just people who are newly interested and trying to like meet other people who share their interest, um, coming together to talk about their shared interest, right? And build relationships and perhaps even like create opportunities to like practice or explore together.
What? You mean I have to put in time for reading and online and going to things before I can feel like I belong and have pleasure in a group of people? Say it ain't so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people sometimes like underestimate the amount of work that it can take to yeah, to like fit into a particular culture, to like really
Yeah.
understand it. Yeah.
And time being of time is the limited resource. And I, as adults, we have seems like fewer and fewer time to then, and in this culture we're not all that good at prioritizing being connected and belonging to our selfness, right? And to find others like, and the amount of time it takes to invest in that it's not just instant. And I think that's part of the myth that people cling to on dating apps and hookup apps
Mm-hmm.
is like, oh, if I just swipe, then I can just find the thing I'm looking for.
Right. Yeah, which again, sometimes that's true, but like for the most part, like I think that it's a good rule of thumb to never underestimate the extent to which people want to be seen as like full and complete human beings.
One of the advice that I like giving for people going to kink parties, and I think it probably also applies to other sorts of sexually social subcultures, is if I'm new to a party, that I'm going to find who the hosts are and go up and say, "Hi, I'm Midori. I'm new to the area, or I'm new to the group, and I don't know really the etiquette in this culture. Could you spend a little time with me?"
Yeah, for sure. I think I just vulnerability, amazing. What a gift. Yeah, totally. I mean, in Bonobo, we do like try to give people a bit of a leg up, so I think I mentioned earlier that it used to be that the opening circle was the main way we
Mhm.
transmit our culture. And I guess I didn't really complete the thought because what I should have said is now, like when people join Bonobo, you have to complete an orientation. And before the pandemic, that orientation happened in person once or twice a month, on like Wednesday nights during the week. And since the pandemic,
I
we've
could
like
never get to it because that's usually when I'm teaching.
totally, yes. And well, and now, we have like recorded the pandemic. I mean, so recorded the orientation and put it into Teachable. And through the magic of our tech wizard guy, we have like automations that like, the moment you purchase your membership, you automatically get a Teachable account made, and then you get like just like kind of put into our orientation, and then you like spend the 2.5 hours like watching our video and watching our videos and reading the materials, and then you complete quizzes to let us know that you actually consumed the content. And then
Mhm.
if you do that successfully, then you get the invitation to join us on our social platform, and you get to like purchase tickets to events and that kind of thing.
It's just like getting my scuba certification.
It's sort of like getting your scuba certification.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's now online too.
Yeah. I mean, I
Online.
will say that like the orientation is a good tool, and I'm very proud of that tool. And I think that like we can't include everything. And as we're sort of thinking about retooling the orientation
Huh.
and really um yeah, focusing a little bit more, like even more than we do on like the idea that Bonobo is a high context community, and here's what you can expect as a new person coming in, particularly as like if you're a cis dude coming in,
Oh,
like what
like third dude in the example.
like third dude, for instance, yeah. Or like what like how to find like community in Bonobo if you're a queer person or a person of color, and like sort of speak to like some of the different identities and like the particular like challenges and realities, and like sort of finding community
Mm.
within our group.
Your orientation, the orientation that I've gone through is like before the Teachable platform, but your orientation is great, and I know that it's been evolving fantastically. Um, and
Thanks.
yeah, it's great, and I think I should check out the new iteration of it too. Now, in the past, I know that Bonobo and you and Misha have shared uh, the orientation, the consent talk, and uh, various aspects that you've learned and instituted with other organizations. Are you still doing that? Like kind
I mean,
of,
we haven't shared the orientation specifically with other well, actually, that's not true. I have shared it with a couple other organizer friends, but I mean, really, like, I think that every culture is different, and people should like take people who are organizers who want to engage with this kind of tool should take the time to like really think through what you want your culture to look like and build the orientation that teaches your particular culture you know um I like I think that like I am pretty good at uh coming up with clever turns of phrase sometimes. And I'm definitely very proud of like the content that we've created around our consent and accountability policy is something that is an open source resource for people. And and we do share that with communities around the world. Really, like there are folks in Australia who've like written us and told us that they've used our policy. There are folks in the Pacific Northwest and New York and Florida. Yeah, I mean, I think that uh like the policy is like just again as a jumping off point for thinking about like what it is you want to like represent in the world and like how you want to be in the world. I think that just like having an example of
yeah,
like it of it can be useful as a
a
tool.
starting point. So that's open source.
Yeah, correct.
And would I be able to get the link to put it in the comments of the video?
Yeah, I mean, you can find it at bonobonetwork.com/consent. You'll find like our framework on the website, and then the actual like accountability policy.
Yeah.
If you click through the link that you'll find on that page, it'll bring you to like the full document, which lives in a Google Doc somewhere.
Great. So when I post this on my site, FHP as well, Planet Midori over as well as YouTube. So for the viewers, I'll put it down in the resources. And for those of you who are live, look in the chat box. And oh, we got a question here. Uh, let's see. Okay. Question. So, and I think this is considering third dude as like a hypothetical generalization because that's something that happens a lot, unfortunately. What's a good approach for an event organizer when third dude situation happens? How, what would help him at, understand what would be more respectful or successful approach?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that just like lots of dungeon spaces in particular, have rules about like not interrupting scenes in particular ways. I mean, in the Bonobo orientation, we actually have a whole piece of our etiquette video that addresses like how we want people to like orient towards um like watching ongoing scenes, and like I basically advise people, like, hey, like you can like you it's fine to ask to watch, but like if you're asking to watch would like disturb a scene that's already in progress, maybe don't, um and um and also like remember that you look with your eyes and not with your hands. Like, generally speaking, permission to watch a scene is just permission to watch it and is not necessarily an invitation to participate in the scene. And generally speaking, you should be thoughtful about asking to join scenes with people you don't already know, because chances are they don't want you to ask. Like very often, like in Bonobo, connections that are made in those parties are the result of like, again, a lot of context, and like people aren't necessarily looking to have like a third person join just for the novelty of it, and so again, I think that just like saying those kinds of things as clearly as you can. And I hear you in the chat that like the scene technically hadn't
Yeah.
started, and so perhaps like a prohibition against interrupting ongoing scenes wouldn't have worked. But I do think that, again, like being clear about like even the nature of consent and like what it is, and like like I don't think you're ever going to come with an orientation that's going to like um solve every specific circumstance, but you can give people the general guidance,
Mhm.
and then I think that one of the places where I think Bonobo has been like reasonably successful over the years is that like we do our best to be a high feedback environment, and so we really tell people like, hey, like you can report stuff to us that you know like isn't necessarily against the rules, and like where there is the confluence of like capacity and perhaps like if we see that something is like a real problem, like we like I have spent over the years so much time just like making phone calls to people saying, hey, like I heard this thing, this is not how we do it here, or here is why like this was less than ideal, like let's talk about like how we would do this differently in the future, right? and
Ah,
and
yeah. And I
yeah,
think
and
that
yeah,
addresses the question of the follow-up person, which was, okay, the party's already started. You're the party organizer of some other organization, right? And this happened, and it was brought to organizers' attention. It was brought to my attention as an organizer that this happened, and it's in the middle of the party. What would you advise this hypothetical organizer?
yeah, if it's in the middle of the party, I mean, uh it it it, it sort of depends. Um you know like you might have the conversation in the middle of the party if you see that someone uh like might just like bug people repeatedly, and you just want to like head that possibility off at the pass, or you might wait until after the party and just like give that attendee a call after the party. If in Bonobo everyone who attends is a member, and so we actually have like everyone's contact information, and so it's like relatively easy for us to do like those kinds of follow-ups. If like you don't know that you'll have that opportunity to do that follow up after the party, then sure, have the conversation at the party, take the person aside, and offer the feedback.
Mhm.
Like, this is actually not how we do it here, And if you want to be like the best possible participant in the space, like like you don't need to shame them, but just like, hey, I want you to find the connection that you are wanting from this space. You know what I mean? And the strategies that you're bringing to the table, and isn't this just like often the case, right? The strategies that you're bringing to the table to get connection just like aren't actually aligned with the culture of the space.
I love
And there doesn't need to be any shame in that, but like there is an opportunity for up leveling your practice so that you can have a better chance of getting what you want instead of alienating people.
I love that phrasing. And I think this is where, for event organizers and party organizers, taking a little time to learn about nonviolent communication is helpful, as well as like, yeah, positive conversation skills. Because I think oftentimes, especially with this outrage-centered culture lately, it's the you did this terrible thing, and I just heard about this.
Yeah.
Mm. But
Yeah, I
leveling
think
your strategy. Yeah.
yeah, I mean I think that like if you're going to take on the work of organizing these kinds of spaces, it would probably benefit you to build your emotional literacy toolbox. Uh,
Mm.
like actually learning counseling skills or coaching skills, and like having some perspective on how to like have hard conversations with people that don't involve shaming them or judging them, or that like assume the best about someone, is actually really important to building the culture that you want, like I, I might get in trouble for saying this, but I really think of like the project of building sex positive communities in the way that we do has a lot in common with the idea of operant conditioning, like something like Pavlov's dogs,
Mhm.
like how do you train dogs? What's the best way to train dogs? It's not with beating them, it's with treats. um, and like here we are, like just trying to like build people, develop people who are incentivized towards like becoming more sensitive to other people's needs, and like more playful and more communicative and more communicative and more consensual. And hopefully like if you like are on that path, you will become like more successful at getting the kinds of connection that you want from the space, right? And so like there's this way in which like I think that if you as an organizer can learn to give people feedback in ways that like aren't triggering their shame, or that like are taking a lot of care, so that like if like people are going to bring their own shame to the conversation no matter what, so that like sometimes that's a thing that you just can't really control, but like if you're like not adding to it, like that's the thing that counts. But yeah, learning to like have those conversations without adding shame to the bucket is just helpful in the project of like building shame resilient people who are the kind of people you want in your community. I told someone recently that the goal of being a party organizer ideally is not to like only invite in the kind of people you already want to party with. It's actually to manufacture the kind of people you want to party with.
To create culture.
Yeah, because like we're all coming from this like sick, shitty, shame-filled, exploitative, extractive culture around sexuality.
Mhm.
And we all have so much to unlearn, or most of us have so much to unlearn.
Mhm.
And unlearning comes in fits and starts. And sometimes you're like, oh God, this thing is still a thing. How is this still a thing? I thought I unlearned that years ago. Um,
Now I can see how this fits into that the conversation time that you have set up in Bonobo. What was it that you called? The hour of chat?
Oh, the daily angel room, the peer support calls.
Yeah, the peer support calls. I can see how the fits and starts and how do I do this better, that's a good space for that.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah,
And
that's a good space for that. Misha and I both offer coaching, and working with us one on one can also be a good space for that.
what happens in those? How
Well,
does
it depends a lot on what you want to work on, but I certainly work with clients on, sort of like developing themselves into like better fits for Bonobo's culture, and like figuring out how to like navigate the community more successfully. I work with um like a lot of people have hired me lately to support them in opening their relationships. And Yeah, so I've worked with a number of couples in the last few years on just like newly open relationships, and creating agreements, and um learning repair skills is
Mhm.
such a big piece of what I've worked with people on in the last few years. It's just so essential to like navigating this space, like any relationship well, really. But yeah, especially in this open relating world, very helpful. So yeah, I've supported people in like learning BDSM skills, and taking some of what I learned from Midori.
And so, in helping people coming up with agreements on opening up their relationships, but also the repair skills, that's great, and that would also come in handy for having better strategies and being a good member of sex positive communities.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that like there is so much opportunity for hurt, and and for drama, really, in these communities. We're dealing with like really charged, really sensitive stuff,
Mhm.
and I like I'm not gonna vouch for every Bonobo member by any stretch of the imagination. But um I do think that a critical mass of us do have like some version of like deeper skill in repair, and in like sort of the practice of relating, and like that level of resourcing in the community has staved off a lot of drama. uh,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Now, we've been talking about your culture and organization, and you mentioned like looking around on Facebook and such, and we touched a little on that. Any other thoughts on where to find the sex positive community that's right for person ABC?
Yeah, for sure. Um I think first think about what your goals are. I'll always start with your goals.
What are some examples of goals?
Yeah. Um, uh, uh, is your goal sexual exploration? If so, what kind? Do you have a sense of like what you feel ready for? Or, do you just want to like dip a toe in and see how it feels? Um, um, are you someone who like has pretty well developed boundaries and can hold those boundaries pretty well, you
Mhm.
know? Um, um, or like, do you need support in holding your boundaries, like that might indicate like that you need to go to like a more contained space, where you don't have to worry about like your boundaries being pushed in certain ways, where you don't have to worry about being overwhelmed, or where you can be overwhelmed in a safer or like harm reductive way. um um yeah, I mean, like there's so many different cultures out there. I think that like uh communities that have their roots in like polyamorous culture, communities and play spaces that have their roots in polyamorous culture, like often feel a little bit different from communities and spaces that have their roots in like swinging culture, for example. And all those spaces have like might feel a little bit different than spaces that have their roots in like BDSM culture.
Mhm.
And then there are all the particularities of like whether those BDSM spaces are spaces that like have traditionally like allowed sexual activity in them or not, right? I mean, like there are just like so many cultural differences between the spaces. And so I think that understanding yourself and your goals will help you to evaluate like whether a particular space might be right for you. It just helps you like figure out, does this space tick this box? Like, does it, also understanding like your emotional needs, like how much containment do you feel like you need? Do you like want a space that's like a little bit more anonymous? Because as it turns out, some people like more anonymous spaces, and like that's actually what appeals to them. That's where they feel safer.
Mhm.
Totally legit, no judgment there. Like there are plenty of like lower context spaces, that like um don't think of themselves as communities. They think of themselves as like a club where like people show up on the regular. And sure, like the
A
regular,
venue.
like yeah, a venue or like an event, a single event, a one-off event. There are other spaces, like Bonobo, that like are more like, oh, we're really rooted in a community, and like we're not a space for like you know for anonymity.
Mhm.
Maybe
So,
that maybe you feel more contained there, right?
so first, have at least some vague sense of what it is that I'm seeking, and that, and I may discover that
Mm-hmm.
that what I thought I wanted is what I wanted, or what I thought I wanted isn't, and
Totally.
it
Yep.
just didn't work out. And if I, and given the multitudes of different kinds of cultures with different roots, and hell, for that matter, different house parties, right? Um, that if I went to this thing and it didn't feel right, there might be another that feels better.
Yep.
So trying different things, and yeah, that sex positive subcultures, or sexually social, or non-normative sexual places and people, that there's so many varieties of it that you just can't paint it with one broad brush. And if one didn't work, it doesn't mean that all of it's a fail. So I figured that out, and now what?
Um,
Let's say I live in some small farm town.
yeah, I mean, so if you live in a small farm town, that's a great question. So if you live in a small farm town, um, you may have fewer options.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might want to look for the nearest big city as one option.
Mm-hmm.
Another really great option actually is that like there are like conventions and events that like bring people together. So Dark Odyssey is one organization that I think does a very good job of bringing people together from a lot of different walks of life.
I love
Um,
that Odyssey.
Kink and sexuality and sort of spiritual dimensions of Eros. And that event happens 4 times a year. There are events like the Portland Kink Festival that just happened last weekend. Um, you know, um, there are big swinger conventions like Naughty in New Orleans or Naughty
Mhm.
in Nolans. I hate that name. Is coming up in June. Um, uh, and I think that the people who do naughty events um, do like multiple
Mhm.
events, like cruise, like a cruise, and I think Naughty and Nolans is like the flagship, but they do like multiple like gatherings a year, I believe.
There's like Test Fest, Tethered Together, Rope Craft. I'm rattling off some of my
Yep, yep,
favorites.
yep, exactly. Yeah.
Some people,
Uh
yeah.
Bonobo is an option actually. We have members around the country, and any of our parties, like our events are mostly in the Bay Area right now. So you could like treat it as like a destination thing and like pick a week, like become a member and pick a weekend or two to like come up to the Bay Area through the
And
year.
one of
Or
your
you could,
retreats.
yeah, I was gonna say, or you could come to the Bonobo Network retreat, which is a 4 day, 3 night um camp out
Was it
experience.
at the same
Yeah,
place?
yeah, yep. In
Place
in
is great.
in California.
Yeah.
Uh yeah, it's a great venue, great facility.
Yeah.
The indoor beds, I believe, are sold out, sadly. But if you have the capacity to camp, or if you are open to bringing an RV or something along those lines, or car camping, like all those things are options. Um, or if you want to stay offsite, that's also an option. Actually, there are like little hotels and resorts nearby. But yeah.
In the Bay Area, Boundless also has events, and I
Yep.
think there's
Boundless and Boundless's event is actually at the same venue as the Bonobo retreat.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just a few weeks later.
And
That's a
what
more
ends up
thing.
happening for folks who are, and I'm really loving that in the chat, you'll see the links. Check it out. So if you go to one of these like large events, and let's say you're from a small farm town and there's not much resources, maybe you went to your nearest big city, like maybe St. Louis or Chicago or Atlanta. But if you decide, oh, Sex Down South, also great
Oh,
event.
Sex Down South. Oh, absolutely! I can't believe I forgot that one.
Love it. So go to one of these national events, and I might think, oh, here I'm coming from the middle of, I don't know, Wisconsin, and I'm going to Dark Odyssey. It's not anywhere near. But what happens is you'll meet people that, surprise, surprise, is in your area. And that's something that can also happen at these national destination events. And many of these national destination events will also have uh, discussion groups. Maybe it's on Mighty Network, maybe it's on Discord, maybe it's on FetLife, or various other um, Plura, formerly um,
In
group.
community. Yep.
Also good places to find out. So going to these national events is not necessarily closing options for back at home.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the internet is is so rich with community because like, again, there are so many people who are just looking for collect connection, who are just looking for like some version of belonging, and they've been in like some small town forever and think they're a fucking freak until they find out, oh wow, there are entire people who organize their lives around this thing that I think makes me like bad or wrong or shameful. And so yeah, I mean, the Discord of American Sex, the American Sex podcast, the Normalizing Non-Monogamy podcast. Emma and Finn are doing just such great work in building their community. The Multiamory folks, the Life on the Swing Set folks, like do
Yeah.
like gather who are based out of Chicago, do gatherings. If you are in, again, like usually in larger cities, like finding like people who do cuddle parties and like cuddle therapists, and that kind of like somatic work can sometimes be a good avenue for like finding touch positive, and like sensuality based communities, right? So
Nice.
yeah, just they're just like so like if like once you know where to look, like it's suddenly like the world is actually like thick with this kind of connection. Oh,
Yeah.
Reddit is actually another obvious choice for
Yeah.
finding.
Oh, I put a tiny toe in Reddit, and then I decided I'm too busy for this. Um, we're about to come to time. This has been really resourceful and helpful, and I really appreciate the people that were giving us comments and examples. Any other resources or homework you'd like to share?
um One of my favorite Instagram accounts about consent, and that just sort of like complicates the conversation about, or I should say complexifies the conversation about consent in very helpful ways, is Sarah Casper's comprehensive consent account. It's like she's just so good and so
Wonderful.
smart, and I think really pokes at very clearly a lot of the insufficiencies of the common discourse around consent. Like it's just so easy to do, like pro forma, or sorry, the standard like enthusiastic consent thing, and still have people feeling like used and unseen and uncared for and so on. And so just like more collaboration focused, more like people centered models of consent are, I think, what's needed. And she just has so much amazing content about that.
I am totally checking out her Instagram. I actually didn't know about it, so I am going to
And
go.
a lot of her stuff is like oriented towards like people who do consent education in
Yeah,
like elementary schools and middle schools and high schools,
yeah. Actually,
but it's like so applicable to what we do. And like I feel like, if you're like gonna try to be an organizer in these spaces, you need to like orient towards being a student and not assume that like and that like the way you've done things forever is still the best way, or in fact was ever the best way.
yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for all of this. I have, speaking of being a student, I have a lot of things that I'm going to like track down. Really appreciate this. And
Yeah,
actually,
thanks for having me. It's so good talking with
yeah.
you all.
I hope I get to see you out in the wild sometime soon.
I'm pretty wild, so it's
You are. So to the
chances
viewers,
are.
yeah. Now, William, stand by and I'm going to close up the recording. And for those of you who are here live, hang around a bit as well. And thank you for watching another episode of Consent Dojo, where one amazing friend at a time, I am learning so many new things. And every day we have to go and build our consent muscle because it ain't easy, but mm, the success is going to be awesome.